And welcome to the latest edition of Prep Talk on LaneCountySportsOnline.com, the one and only weekly internet-based radio broadcast dedicated to high school sports in Lane County, Oregon. I'm Marvin Hammersmith here with my partner Chris Park. Chris, what's on the agenda for today's show?
Well, let's review some games from last week just quickly, and then we'll get into more depth. But Sheldon had a big game with Roseburg here in Eugene. Thurston had a tough one down at Crater. Cottage Grove, nice win, takes control of the Sky M. We'll go over all of those here in a little bit. We also have an interview with Thurston football coach Justin Starck. That's going to be really exciting. That'll be coming up. I think, first of all, we should jump in and talk about some of the big games this past week that we just had in 6A, Marvin.
Yeah, first off, right off the top, Sheldon did defeat Roseburg 21-14. Really a close game throughout the game. It was tied 7-7 at the half, but Sheldon's defense actually came up big a couple of times and gave them an opportunity to go down and score and win the game. So congratulations to the Irish. That was a really hard-fought win for them.
Yeah, close game, 21-14, and I was just sort of impressed by, this is two good 6A teams, 21-14. It's not a 50-14 blowout, a good game all around, and maybe the home field really kind of helped for Sheldon. It was tight for a half, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah, 7-7 at the half. Good crowd out at the game, and last week we had Thurman Bell on as our guest, and I'm sure that he and his team gave it their all, but Sheldon came out on top again. Other scores: North Medford 34, South Eugene 7. South just continues to struggle, but North Medford, leading the pack, 5-0 in league play. So their only loss was the first game of the season to McNary, and that was a close loss, like a 14-13 game. So
yeah.
I think North Medford is definitely for real this year. And then Crater 63, Thurston 34, and that was down at Crater. Lots of offense in that game, but Thurston just came out on the tail end of that one this week.
Yeah, and Thurston got down 28-7 in the first quarter. Then not good. That's just too much in the first quarter. We'll have Justin Starck, the Thurston football coach, here in a little bit. 4 interceptions, unfortunately, for Thurston quarterback Brendan Quinn. So tough go at it for Thurston, but we'll get a little bit of the details from Justin Starck coming up. I've got some 4A scores. Cottage Grove 35-6 over Junction City. Previously unbeaten Junction City now has a loss at 5-1. Cottage Grove is 5-2.
I thought that game was going to be closer.
Well, I thought it maybe could have been a little closer, but the offense by Cottage Grove is like the Oregon Ducks. They can run it, they can pass it, and they score points very quickly. But Junction City had the right game plan. They tried to slow things down. They had some nice long drives that took up a lot of time, and that was their game plan, and it worked for a little while. But Cottage Grove was just very efficient when they did get the ball. So they're in control of the Sky M now. Their tough non-league schedule to start the year is paying dividends for Cottage Grove. Elmira 33, Sisters 20, and Siuslaw remains undefeated in the Far West at 7-0. They won 41-8 over Brookings. Those are your 4A scores right there. And Scotty Hittner, I want to mention, the quarterback for Cottage Grove, had a nice game, 12 out of 18, nearly 200 yards passing.
And he had a couple of touchdowns, I believe, running the ball as well.
Yep. They've done real well after that tough non-league schedule, so they're in control. Next week, Cottage Grove goes to Sisters, I believe. So they've got the Sky M looking their way. They just want to keep rolling here. You got some 5A scores you want to do before we jump into Stump Marvin?
Yeah, sure. Eagle Point 56, Willamette 35. That game was played on Thursday night. Eagle Point, the scoring did kind of go back and forth there for a little bit. Then Eagle Point reeled off 22 unanswered points, and Willamette wasn't able to come back from that.
And nearly 300 yards for the Eagle Point running back, Seth Arena. He did real well and kind of had a bust-out game there against Willamette. So 2 wins in Eugene area for Eagle Point.
I just got this feeling that Eagle Point's one of those teams that just lacked confidence, and coming up here and defeating Marist a couple of weeks ago may have just given them that confidence level to go out there and start playing really well.
Well, that might be true, and hopefully they can continue that. I know they've got to play They've got a game against Ashland coming up, probably there, as year end, so that'll be interesting.
Weeks, yep.
See how they do there.
Friday night, Marist 40, Churchill 14. Let's see, I did reel off some stats from that game. Up to this point this year, Marist is averaging almost 146 yards receiving and over 200 yards rushing on the year. And I think that Marist is maybe getting back on track there, but we'll see because we're going to talk about their game coming up this week. Springfield 64, North Eugene 12. I did actually attend that game, and I can tell you that I was quite surprised because the first quarter the score was 19-12. And was actually a close game. And in the second quarter, to start the second quarter, North Eugene had the ball, but then turned it over, and Springfield just kind of ran away with it after that. And the thing I noticed about North Eugene was they just lacked people.
Yeah. And just subs on the sidelines even.
Yeah, and they towards the end of the game, some of their starters started getting banged up, and it really showed out there in the field. Not to sell Springfield short, their playmakers went out there and made plays. They've got a really solid-looking football team, and I think that they're going to that's going to serve them well in the playoffs coming up.
The escapability of the Springfield quarterback Trevor Watson is going to be an interesting issue, perhaps next week. I think I've seen that a couple of times with some escapable quarterbacks. For example, the Eagle Point quarterback Quintero, and then last week Churchill's quarterback was fairly good at making things happen when things break down. So he's almost, that's a factor that I think might challenge the defense for Marist. And I might give a little edge to Springfield with that ability to pass and run equally well.
And again, numbers. I think Springfield also has the edge there. They platoon a lot of people, especially on defense. I saw them running people in and out of the game on the defensive line. They've got some big bodies that they can stay fresh. They don't have a whole lot of people playing both ways, and so I think that I would give Springfield the edge there.
How were the turnovers and the penalties in the Springfield game against North Eugene?
They only had one turnover that I can recall, and it was on a muffed punt. It did set up North Eugene's second touchdown. They don't make a whole lot of mistakes. I saw a few penalties here and there. Nothing too bad, holding or procedure penalties, but a couple of lapses in judgment. But that happens at this level. So, I all in all, I thought they were a pretty well disciplined team.
Excellent. Well, I'll get to some 3A scores in a moment, but before that, I'm going to surprise you, Marvin. We're going to move into Stump Marvin. And this is that time when we have a trivia question for Marvin, and we try to stump him and get him thinking and fool him, and hopefully he'll...
I got 2 out of 3 last week.
Actually, you've been doing great. Early on in some previous shows, we had to change it to Stomp Marvin because we were getting you every time. But lately, you've done real well. So, time for some Stump Marvin. Are you ready?
I am. Far away.
Okay, so... we have Thurston football coach Justin Starck coming up shortly, so in honor of that, I thought we'd do some Thurston trivia. How many state championships has Thurston won in football?
State championships, huh?
State championships in football for the Thurston Colts.
Well, I think I can only recall one. But, as we both have found out in the recent past, that my history doesn't go all that far back as high school football in the state of Oregon goes. It goes back quite a ways, but there is only one state championship I can recall, and I believe it was in the 1990s. So I'm going to go...
And how many have they won?
How many have they won?
How many state championships has Thurston won?
I'm going to say... I'm just... And again, this one I'm just going to take a guess at because I honestly don't know. I'm going to say... I'm going to say 0.
That's correct.
Really?
I tried to fool you, Marvin. Okay. But they've been in one.
Yeah, I do recall that
They've
one
been in
state.
one, yeah.
I do recall that state championship that they were in.
And that's the next question. When was Thurston last in a state championship? And this would be the only state championship. When were they in a state championship in football?
Boy, I keep wanting to say 1993.
1993. Well, no, that's not the answer.
Oh. Do I get another guess?
Well, yeah, I'll give you another guess.
Oh. How about, was it in the 90s?
No.
Oh. Well, then I'm going to say maybe they started out, I don't know, 2001 then maybe.
Nope. 2008.
That wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't. They were in the state championship in 5A, back when they were 5A. And they lost to a team 35-28. Any idea who they lost to?
In 2008, that's only 5 years ago.
It's only 5 years ago, yeah. They lost 35-28. They had a quarterback, Thurston did, by the name of Tim Pearson. And they had a really super great offensive line. I don't remember any of the names, but a lot of big guys. And
well, I can tell you that that was traditional Midwestern League, because that was, I think that was the year before everybody started moving around.
Yeah, Sheldon was 6A that year. Thurston was still 5A. But they lost to West Albany.
West Albany?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, in 95, Thurston did get to the semis, and maybe that's what you were thinking when they lost to an Eagle Point team 21-18 in the semis. So Thurston won state championship appearance, and they did lose to West Albany in 2008. In 95, they were in the semis. So I think we may have stumped you today, Marvin.
Yeah, I think I'll chalk this one up as a loss. I'll admit, and hopefully Coach Starck can help me out later in the interview, but I am not. That Thurston is one of those teams that just traditionally, until we started doing this year, really hadn't paid a whole lot of attention to Thurston, and I should pay a whole lot more attention to them, because they're a good, solid football program, and they play some good football.
And now you know, and I think you probably just set yourself up for getting a lot of email about Thurston football.
Yep, bring it on. I'd love to hear from folks, and any nice little tidbits you can offer me on Thurston football, I would certainly appreciate it.
The key word there was nice, I think. So I'll go on to some 3A scores. I saw Pleasant Hill play, and they beat Jefferson 66-0. This was essentially the Charlie Ward show. He basically ran for 300 yards.
Wow.
7 touchdowns, all in the first half. Running clock early, and start the second half. Pleasant Hill needed a win, and 66-0 was a way to get it there. They got a tough game next week against Scio. They're battling for a top 4 spot in their league to make the playoffs. And this is one of those things where it's hard to figure out sometimes who's in the playoffs. But at 3A, you need to be in the top 4 of your league for the Pac West. Doesn't matter what the OSA rankings are. If you're not in the top 4, you're not in. So they are battling there. Harrisburg 45, Creswell 6. Harrisburg not in our Lane County area, but close enough. They actually lead that Pac West League. Have been the big surprise. So that's your 3A score.
I did see some highlights from that Harrisburg game, and I can tell you that quarterback for them is something else. Really, talk about escapability. There was one play where he was completely wrapped up by the defensive lineman, got away, and threw a spectacular touchdown pass.
Nice.
Yeah. So
well, Harrisburg, they're on the top of the league at the Pac West so far, and they've been a bit of a surprise. They're 6-0 overall, 4-0 in the league. Pleasant Hill will have to go to Harrisburg, not this coming week, because Pleasant Hill is going to face Scio at home, but they will have to go up there the following week, P. Hill at Harrisburg. P. Hill needs to get a couple wins here to stay in the race.
Speaking of stadiums, nice stadiums to watch a football game. Actually, I have been to a football game at Harrisburg, and they have quite the nice little stadium there.
Yeah, and I would echo the same with Pleasant Hill with their turf. They're in year 2 of their turf, and a great place for a high school game. I had a great time watching that one. I think I enjoy every high school stadium. Wherever I go, that becomes my favorite one.
Yep, I agree. And I have just one 2A score, Chris. Oak Ridge got on the winning path. They blanked Riddle 16-0 at home.
Very nice.
How about the track meet we call 1A?
Exactly. 1A, Lowell 76, Mohawk 8. Yeah, that's definitely a track meet. Lowell is 6-0, undefeated. Triangle Lake 76, trying to keep up with Lowell. They beat Crow 76-14. Yoncalla 44, Silence Valley 30, Mapleton 60, McKenzie 58. Wouldn't that have been a great one to see?
Close
a shootout
game.
there?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Lowell and Triangle Lake are both at the top of the league. Yoncalla's 3-1. They're right now third in that 1A Special District League. That's shaping out to be a nice playoff run coming up. So Triangle Lake, Lowell, when they next week, I think Lowell's at Siletz Valley, but the following week, Triangle Lake at Lowell's going to be a biggie, and Yoncalla's still in the hunt too. Yoncalla at Triangle Lake next week will be big for 1A.
You know, I may go on record here to tell you that I may try to go to that Triangle Lake Lowell game.
Yeah, that could be a real good one right there.
Yep. I think I might skip on out there and see if I can get out there to watch their game.
I think we had that as one of our Stump Marvin questions earlier this year, the mascot for the Lowell High School. Perhaps you...
Red Devils.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, my short-term memory is not too bad.
I wish we could only stump you with the same question once.
Well, Chris, what do you say we take a break for a moment? We'll be right back with more on Prep Talk on LaneCountySportsOnline.com.
And welcome back to Prep Talk on LaneCountySportsOnline.com. This is Chris Park and my partner Marvin Hammerschmidt. This afternoon, we are pleased to have Thurston head football coach Justin Starck with us this afternoon. Coach Starck, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us here on Prep Talk.
My pleasure.
First of all, let's talk a little bit about and review your background for our listeners. You're a former Oregon Duck offensive lineman. What year did you play for the Ducks?
I was there in 92 and 93.
Okay, 92, 93. And I believe, is this your 10th year as the head football coach at Thurston?
That's correct. Actually, 11th.
11th, okay. And I think you used to be, or maybe you still currently are, the athletic director. Tell us a little bit about your background and maybe expand on some of those things that we just talked about.
No, I finished playing at the University of Oregon and had a cup of coffee in the NFL and did some things in the Arena League and World League or NFL Europe, and then was fortunate to wind up at Thurston in 1996, coaching for a man named Don Stone, and I was lucky to meet my future wife here and have a family and wound up getting the head coaching job in 2003, and it's been a nice run. We've had a lot of fun with it.
Excellent. You also teach a subject out at Thurston High School?
I do. I'm a PE teacher, and I am the athletic director.
So you got 3 full things on your plate there.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this season so far. The Colts are 1-6. You've had some really close losses early in the year. Last week, a tough loss down at Crater, 63-34. You probably don't really want to talk about it anymore because it's 4 days past, but just maybe a quick retrospect. Anything in retrospect from that Crater game?
Well, that was actually our worst game of the year. That was one of the widest margins of defeat, and it was one of our worst games, and it was one of the most frustrating games we've had this year. Really hope that we could turn some things around and get some guys healthy and show some improvement, and we weren't able to do that. We just got out of our game plan right away and got put in a situation where we were kind of pass only and playing catch up from an offensive standpoint, and we both in special teams and on offense, we put our defense in some really tough spots, taking some chances, trying to get back in the game, and just really made things worse. And it was just kind of a snowball effect, and it was a frustrating game, and we're really eager to recover and to get back on the right track.
Well, thinking about that, what kind of things are you guys working on this week to improve?
We're just working on fundamentals, to be honest with you. Every time you struggle, you have to go back to your fundamentals. You really have to go back and make sure you're doing the little things properly, because typically when we struggle, we can identify that we're not doing some very small things properly, whether it's blocking, whether it's alignment on defense. For our quarterbacks, it's their read progressions and things like that. And typically those are the things that begin to suffer when we struggle. Kids revert back to their bad habits.
Well, this week you guys go across town and play the Sheldon Irish. And I know it's only Tuesday of the work week, but what have you seen out of your team this week? Have they responded?
Well, they're practicing hard. They're practicing hard, and they want to improve. And we try and take a real methodical approach to every opponent. And kids always get excited to play Sheldon because they're the premier program in the state, but they understand that we need to focus on ourselves, that we are our own worst enemy, and when we improve and we do things right, then we will be prepared to play on Friday night. So it's been a good week so far.
You're listening to Prep Talk. This is LaneCountySportsOnline.com. We're talking with Justin Starck. He's the head football coach out at Thurston High School. Coach Starck, what's maybe 1 or 2 things, regardless of the outcome of the game this coming Friday against Sheldon, 1 or 2 things you want to see your team improve on this week?
I really hope to see us tackle better, and I really, really want to see us play better special teams. I want to see our kickoff coverage and kickoff return teams improve.
Excellent.
Well, kind of changing gears here a little bit. If you had a vote, what teams would you put as the top 3 teams in the state of Oregon in the 6A classification?
So I would go with Tigard, Central Catholic, and Sheldon.
Boy, you didn't even have to spend much time thinking about that one. I think that says a lot there, Coach Starck.
Well, we know who we don't want to draw early. We're hopeful that we can win a play-in game and make the playoffs, and there's kind of 3 really tough teams sitting there. So
Let me ask you what you might say to your team in practice, pre-practice speech this week or pre-game speech Friday. Other than the technical things, what kind of motivational things might you say to your team to get them fired up playing Sheldon?
Yeah, we don't do a lot of motivational stuff on Friday night, but we talk a lot on Sunday afternoon when we meet and on Monday, and all of our kids just need to focus on being the best they can be every single day and trying to get better every day. And we challenge them to do that Monday, and I challenged them again this morning in our class, and it's trying to improve. And they've responded well, and they're trying to get the most out of their practices. So we're just really taking that internal approach and just asking every boy to do everything they can to get better every day.
This is Prep Talk on LaneCountySportsOnline.com. We're talking with Thurston head football coach Justin Starck. Coach Starck, another hypothetical. I seem to like those for some reason, but let's say you're in a close game this Friday with Sheldon. It's a tie score, under a minute to play, and the ball is in the red zone. Would you prefer your team to be on offense or defense in that situation?
Offense, 100%.
Okay. And why is that?
Well, because we've been pretty productive offensively. I think we've got a good kicker if we need to kick the ball. And I just feel like our offense has been pretty consistent all year. Our defense has struggled late in games and holding leads. We've lost 3 leads late in games this season. So I don't want to be in that position again. But I look forward to being in that position, I guess, to see how they respond, because I think our kids are improving. But if I had to choose, I would want the ball.
Okay.
Great. Well, again, switching gears, thinking about all the stadiums that you've played in over the past 11 years, which is one or two of the most difficult high school stadiums that you've played in on the road?
Well, that's a good question. Wow, Roseburg is not an easy place to play. There's a combination of factors that make that a difficult place to play. Wow, I'd have to think for a minute on that one.
Well, let me bail you out there, Coach Starck, and you can think about that for a second. Here's another hypothetical. If Springfield and Thurston were to play this year, what would that game look like? And maybe perhaps just talk a little bit about, is there possible that rivalry gets renewed in the future?
Yeah, I don't know what that game would look like at this point. I know that Trevor Watson is a fine football player. Really good football player. They've got some great players around him. He's just really good football players on that team, and so Coach Heiberger's done a heck of a job. So I don't know what that game would look like, but I know they've got a great team, and I know they're going to have a great postseason this year. It's possible that game goes back on the schedule soon in the past, because we were in different divisions, different classifications.
Yeah.
And with the RPI, it really wasn't in our best interest to play Springfield.
Right.
And, honestly, now the tables are kind of turned. Springfield's, I'm not sure it's in their best interest to play us. We're struggling right now as a program, and our record, we're not winning 7, 8, 9 games a year. So I'm not sure it's in their best interest, but we'll see. And I know that we'll talk about it this offseason, and it's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Well, hey, along those same lines, and since you're the athletic director there at Thurston, do you prefer a 6 classification or a 5 classification system in the OSAA?
I would have preferred a 6 classification with Thurston in the 5A. That would have been my preference, since we are the second smallest 6A team. But they set that bar at us, and then my next preference would be 5A.
Well, I was taking a look at the numbers earlier this year, and their cutoff is like 1,260 students is the cutoff between 5A and 6A, and you were listed at 1,263.
Right.
Are you like going to ask 3 or 4 students to transfer, or how would you like to handle that?
Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. It's based on your numbers from last year, so our current numbers don't count.
Oh, that's too bad.
Well, we've got just 1 or 2 more questions for you here, Coach Starck. This is Prep Talk. Chris Park, Marvin Hammerschmidt on LaneCountySportsOnline.com. We've talked with Thurston head football coach Justin Starck. Before we cut you loose, just a couple more questions. Can you name one or two players on your team that have impressed you this season, either with their play, their work ethic, or their leadership?
Yeah, Carson Cook is a first-year player. He's never played football before. He's a basketball player that we convinced to come out and play receiver, and he's a phenomenal player. And I really believe he could play Division I football as a receiver. And he's got a set of skills that will translate at the Division I level. So I've been very impressed with him. And my next kid that I've been very impressed with and happy that we have is Brendan Quinn, our quarterback. We're fortunate to have him, and he's been a pleasure to coach.
That's awesome. Can you give us maybe, last question actually, can you give us 2 or maybe 3 names for possible Player of the Year honors for your conference? Can be offense or defense.
That's a tough one. Normally it would always go to the Sheldon guys, but with North Medford, running out in front, I don't know. There isn't a Connor Strom or that huge name running around the league right now. So, I really don't know. A lot of solid players. I'm sorry I can't answer that one.
That's okay.
Lots of football still left to be played, but you're right, there is no front runner at this point. Excellent. Okay, well, that's going to conclude our interview here on Prep Talk on LaneCountySportsOnline.com with Thurston football coach Justin Starck.
And welcome back to Prep Talk. This is Marvin Hammersmith and Chris Park on LaneCountySportsOnline.com. Prep Talk, the one and only weekly internet-based radio broadcast dedicated to high school sports in Lane County, Oregon. Well, that was a great interview with Justin Starck.
It was. I enjoyed that interview. He's an honest fellow and gave us some really good tips there. I like the hypotheticals that we posed. The first one, it's a tight game with Sheldon, scores tied, less than a minute, ball's in the red zone, you want to be on offense or defense, and he jumped at offense. Did you notice that?
Yeah, right away.
Yeah.
And I know I kind of suspected he would because I do know that their defense has struggled this year. And my feeling, and this is in my opinion only, when the game's on the line, you want your offense to have the ball to go down and score because if you can score, game over, and you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, so I think they did have that tight game against North Medford where the North Medford quarterback scrambled in with about 15 seconds to go. But his defense, Thurston defense, has given up 41 points a game, which is kind of uncharacteristic of Thurston. Usually they have a pretty tenacious D, but this year they've really been giving up points. And the quarterback, I think Brendan Quinn has done a good job. We asked, a couple players that really have impressed him. He had his wide receiver Cook, and then his quarterback Brendan Quinn. Is having a good year, 63% completion rate, 13 TDs, but unfortunately 11 INTs. So Thurston trying to get back on track here. Very good interview. Also mentioned some OSAA realignment stuff.
Yeah, I'd like to ask these guys, what they think because they're the ones that have to go out and prepare for these teams week in and week out. And so I kind of like to get their perspective on how they would like the leagues to settle out if they had a say. Like Thurman Bell and Justin Starck, both with athletic director experience or current athletic directors, they're in the thick of it. They're making those decisions. So it's interesting to hear their perspective on it.
Yeah, and Thurston is, they could be 5A right now with their numbers. There's like 3 to 4 kids over the limit. There are larger schools that are still playing 5A. Bend is a bigger school that meets the 6A requirements, but because they're geographically isolated, they've had a waiver from OSAA to play in the 5A level. But Thurston is probably the smallest, 6A school. They're really a 5A school playing 6A.
Well, and Willamette High School is currently at the 6A level, and with the current plan of realignment goes through, if it goes through, Willamette's moving up to 6A next year. So, it's interesting. There's a lot of factors that go into figuring this whole thing out, and my hat's off to those guys for doing it.
Well, he also talked about scheduling. Coach Starck talked about, we mentioned renewing the Springfield-Thurston rivalry, and he gave us a little background about why that hasn't happened. They've been in different classifications. It's been difficult, and it really has been advantageous to either school. At times. So he mentioned that in the interview, and I thought that was good. But great interview with Justin Starck. We really appreciate his time. I know he's a busy guy. Just wrapped up practice, I think, and sat down with us for a few minutes there on the phone.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Great interview. So let's preview some of this week's games.
Yeah, let's go through some of the games coming up this week. Good luck to all the teams and the kids. Play good, play injury-free. I'll start with some 4A games. Junction City is at Sweet Home. They're in control of the Sky-M. They're on second place in the Sky-M at this point. JC wants to get a win after their loss at Cottage Grove. Cottage Grove is at Sisters. Cottage Grove is in control of the Sky-M. Lapine is at Elmira. Siuslaw in the far west is Idle this week. A rare bye. Siuslaw has North Bend coming up next week. That'll be big.
That's a big game for them. I'll move on up to 6A. We've talked to Coach Starck about this week. Thurston is at Sheldon. I'm sure that he's, like he talked about, they're working on the fundamentals, tackling.
Good point, yeah. And he didn't
blocking,
hesitate
catching.
About what things to work on this week. He said, we got to tackle better.
Yeah, and you will need to tackle very well against Sheldon. That's for sure. Crater is coming up to play South Eugene. Crater, just off of their big win against Thurston, is going to come up and play the Axemen.
I'd like to see South Eugene bounce back and get a win, get a league win here. That'd be nice.
It would be.
I got some 3A games. Scio is at Pleasant Hill. Very big game for Pleasant Hill. They want to be in the top 4 spots in the Pac West. They had a nice win last week, home against Jefferson. Now they're home against Scio. This is going to be a dogfight. Scio is very physical. I had a chance to talk with co-head coach Kirk Miller after that Pleasant Hill game, and he mentioned that the Scio is physical and we need to be fundamental. So that'll be a good game. San Am Christian is at Creswell in 3A.
Moving on back up to 5A. Willamette is at Ashland this week. Willamette has the tough task of trying to knock off the Ashland Grizzly, who is undefeated this year. Good luck to them going down there. I know that Ashland is a really disciplined team. We've talked about it before, and Willamette's going to have their hands full with them for sure. Churchill is at North Eugene. Churchill coming off their loss to Marist, and North Eugene lost to Springfield. So both of those teams looking to get back on the winning track. The big game in 5A this week, Springfield is at Marist. This is kind of becoming a rivalry of sorts. Springfield being coached by Dave Heiberger, the ex-Marist assistant coach, and Marist is fighting for playoff position at this point. So I think that this could end up being a really, really good game.
And there are 2 assistant coaches on Heiberger's staff that are former assistants at Marist, so a
That's
total
correct.
of 3. I think it's a good rivalry. I know they have respect for each other both ways. Interesting. What do you think will happen regarding the OSAA RPI with this one, Marvin? And the RPI is really more important for 5A. It's not that important for 6A because if you're in the top 4 in the Southwest Conference, you're going to make the playoffs. But in 5A, that RPI really becomes more important because if you win your league, it's a good thing to win your league, but it doesn't help you for playoffs.
That's we kind of talked about this earlier, but Springfield probably has more to lose than Marist this week. The way the RPI is figured in 5A, Marist has one more loss than Springfield. A Marist win against Springfield would certainly help bump up their RPI, and they would probably move up substantially in the rankings. Springfield with a win would maintain their position, perhaps move up if somebody above them loses this week. But a Springfield loss would hurt them just because Marist's record, their opposition's record holds 60% of their calculation. It would certainly hurt them, and they would even perhaps swap places. I think Springfield is 8 and or no,
Springfield's 4 right
4.
now. So you're saying that with a win, Springfield will likely not move up much at all, but with a loss could move down more.
Could move down
and just the
substantially.
opposite for Marist this week.
Yeah. So there's a lot to be playing for this week. Springfield against Marist, and like I said, I got to see Springfield last week. They have a lot of playmakers at a lot of positions. They've got a big line. They've got a lot of kids out for football, and Coach Dave Heiberger has done a really nice job getting that program turned around. And I think that I'm not good at high school predictions, just like you.
Things are pretty hard. Yeah.
I wish good luck to both teams, and hopefully everybody plays well and plays safe.
Well, one thing I can say for certain is that this year in the playoffs, for 5A anyway, the quarterfinal matchups and the semi-final matchups are going to be really good games.
Oh, they are. There's no doubt about that.
Sherwood's not involved on one of the teams, but I think there will be some really good first-round games because there's teams. Mountain View is 5-2. A couple of their losses are to 6A schools.
Right.
I think they lost to McNary and maybe South or West Salem.
But looking at that top 8, Chris, there's a couple of newcomers this year. We see Sherwood, West Albany. Even Ashland's been there, Silverton and Mountain View. Those guys are there, it seems, year in and year out. But we're sitting there at number 3, Roosevelt, newcomer, and at number 6, Park Rose.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not sure what their schedules are like the rest of the way, but, for those guys to be sitting there, they've got to be awfully excited about their programs.
I think the quarterfinal games are going to be better this year. There are going to be some real good games. There could be some real tough matchups there. 2A, Marvin, what do you got coming up next week?
2A, Oak Ridge is playing at North Douglas, and I know that North Douglas has been struggling. It wouldn't surprise me for Oak Ridge to get a win this week again. That would make, I believe, 2 wins in a row for them if they can get by North Douglas this week. Yeah. How about the powerful 1A?
1A, Mapleton is at Mohawk. Lowell is at Silence Valley. Crow is at McKenzie. And the big one is Joncala at Triangle Lake. Joncala has 1 loss in league. Triangle Lake is undefeated in league. So that's probably the biggie there, Joncala at Triangle Lake. Lowell is 6-0 overall. Triangle Lake is also 6-0. That game looms down the road, not this coming Friday, but the following. So 1A is looking good.
Just looking at the 1A standings right now, Lowell sits at number 2, Triangle Lake at 6. But the interesting thing is, Imbler. Do you know where Imbler is?
I'm going to guess over eastern Oregon by Wallowa Lake.
I'll take your word for it.
I'm guessing. I don't know for sure.
They are the number 1 ranked team in the OSAA rankings right now. They have a loss, but the difference here being, and again, I can't emphasize this enough, 60% of your RPI percentage is based on your opponent's winning percentage. And their opponent's winning percentage is at .624, whereas Lowell's is .517. So the Lowell opponents are what's hurting them in the rankings.
Yeah. Yep. And, Imbler's loss is to the Doofer.
Which is a 1A powerhouse as well.
Yeah.
How are the 6A rankings shaping up there, Chris? Any big changes that you've noticed?
Well, Sheldon is number 7, and again, it's not as important for 6A as it is 5A. You really want to win your league, so that's really the point to emphasize there is that win your league. North Medford is number 9, and really what we want to do is probably take a look at what's the league, who's going to win the league. As long as you're in the top 4. In that league, you're in. You're going to get. Actually, everybody gets in 6A.
Yeah, it's true.
So Thurston, they're at 1 and 6. 39th actually in the RPI. But really, I think if you ask Coach Starck that, he wouldn't care about their RPI. He just wants to, get a win in that play-in round. So he's looking for his team to get better, and that's what he mentioned in our interview this week with him,
right.
Coach Justin Starck. Is get in the playing round and get a win. At this point, Thurston looks like they're probably going to be on the road unless they can get a win this week against Sheldon.
Well, certainly a win against Sheldon would really hurt them. They end the season with South Eugene, which at this point you would say on paper that Thurston should get a win there. But
it's the top 20, from 20 to 42. Will play in that playing round. So if you're not in the top 11 of theirs, so if you're 31 or further, you're going to be on the road. So it's highly likely Thurston will be on the road. But what a great opportunity for those Thurston kids to, work hard, get to that playing game, get a win on the road, and then you just never know what happens in the playoffs. You start playing well, you come together as a team, you get a couple breaks. I think all a high school athlete wants is a chance.
That's true, and anything can happen in the playoffs. You get teams that, it's the end of the year. They could be hindered by a lot of injuries. Their schedule at the beginning of the season carried them on through, but now it's crunch time. So I think that playoffs are interesting, and that's part of the season I love. I love the playoffs and seeing all these teams come together from all over the state and play each other, and somebody ends up out on top. So
the only thing I don't like is that it's confusing from one classification to the next. Everybody gets in 6A. In 5A, you've got 8 teams that don't get in at all.
Correct.
And they use the rankings more than league championships.
Yeah.
Then you go to 4A, and they do a combination of do you win your league and where you're ranked at. So it's really hard to figure out from one level classification-wise. I wish the OSA would get it more consistent, because from our standpoint, it's hard to figure out who's going to qualify for the playoffs. My other gripe, while I'm on my soapbox here, is we used to sort of keep stats and talk about, well, this team has made the playoffs 8 consecutive years or 8 out of 10 years. Well, that's kind of gone out the window when everybody gets in a play-in. That stat is less exciting because, well, everybody makes the playoffs. So
yeah, it's kind of that everybody gets a trophy kind of a thing, and I'm on the fence. I do enjoy really watching the 5A playoffs and how they shape up, but the 6A has it going as well, and 4A does their thing, and all the teams that make the playoffs, it's a special time of year for them as well.
Yeah.
So,
and I've heard people say, well, 32 teams, in 5A is too few. and having playoffs with that many teams. Well, that's how many they have in the NFL.
Yep.
You know, so I mean, if you're the number one team out of 32 teams, I still think that's a good accomplishment. You know, you look at the NCAAs. You know, yeah, there's over 100 teams, but realistically, only about 20 of those have a shot. So as long as you have playoffs where you're having about 30 teams, I think 32 is okay. That's not too low of a number.
Well, and don't get me started on my soapbox on the NCAA playoffs.
We could do a whole show on that.
We could do a whole show on that. So, well, that's going to wrap up this edition of Prep Talk. Make sure to tune in for our next show and our interview with Tim Dotson, the head football coach over at Siuslaw, the Vikings. And as always, check the website, LaneCountySportsOnline.com, for the schedule and for accessing shows. I'm Marvin Hammersmith.
I'm Chris Park.
And you've been listening to Prep Talk. Until next time, so long.